Overdrive today, we review the Triumph Street Triple R and pit the Royal Enfield Classic 350 against the Benelli Imperiale 400. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I'm Soini Datta. We've just realized we haven't been getting you a lot of motorcycle stories. So this week we'll be only focusing on two-wheeler action. Now the Street Triple R has just replaced the Street Triple S as the entry-level middleweight naked sports bike in the Triumph India portfolio, and that's not only good news for the brand but it's also good news for the riders, and here's why.
With the Daytona gone, Triumph was left with no motorcycle that could prove their prowess on the racetrack. And then the Street Triple RS had to pick up that mantle. But in doing so, it lost some of that friendly character that made the Street Triple such a likable motorcycle amongst a lot of riders. In comparison, the Street Triple S came across to be a little too friendly, and in company of bikes like the 790 Duke, a little too docile as well. So with this midlife makeover that has been given to the Street Triple lineup, or with this BS6 transition that is happening, Triumph India has used this opportunity to address that concern, and they've launched the Street Triple R in place of the S. And that could be just the right move, not just for them, but also for us. The Street Triple R benefits from most of the cosmetic changes that we saw with the new RS, meaning it gets the controversial yet angry headlights with LED lamps that work surprisingly well in our conditions. The matte grey and red paint scheme seen here is very much like the outgoing RS, superbly finished in typical Triumph fashion and also complemented quite well by the high quality fit and finish of all the parts and peripherals. I think the Street Triple R also looks a tad bit sportier thanks to that red subframe, which looks like it came straight out of the track-bred Daytona 675R. The Street Triple R, however, is more road focused. To that effect, it has marginal differences to its rake and trail over the RS, which aim to make it slightly more agile and easier to maneuver than the RS in city use. Honestly, the difference is hard to notice. What you might notice though is the marginal 2 kg increment in the R's weight over the RS. But at 168 kilos, the Street Triple is generally light and very easy to maneuver. Triumph only sells the standard seat height version of the Street Triple in India, and its 825mm seat height should make you feel right in your comfort zone if you are 5'6" and up. I am 5'8". While on the road, its average size feels comfortable for day-long riding. The seats also contribute to that effect with their slightly firm cushioning and wide design. The console in the Street Triple R is very similar to the outgoing Street Triple S, meaning you get an LCD screen mated to an analog tachometer with all these telltale lights laid around it. As far as the console goes, it gets an additional riding mode, a sport mode that is for the R that you get over the outgoing S. Now, unlike the Street Triple RS, which gets a TFT screen with layers of menus, you don't get that, and that is why you get a much simpler switchgear here. You don't get any joysticks. You get a simple mode selector to cycle through the various riding modes. You get a rider mode too, which lets you choose your own ABS and traction control preferences. The Daytona-derived 765cc engine has been the big talking point for this generation of the Street Triple, and the R will leave you grinning wide too. There are two ways to look at it. It's 6 PS more powerful than the S or 5 PS lesser than the RS. Whatever makes you happy. What makes me happy is the fact that it is not even a blink of an eye slower than the RS in its outright acceleration. It goes from 0 to 100 in our test in 3.65 seconds. That's slower than the RS or quicker than the 790 Duke. Whatever makes you happy. The Euro 5 or BS6 models also receive a bit of reworking inside the engine, which has reduced the inertial losses. The engine still doesn't feel as creamy smooth as the Z900s, nor is it as responsive to small bouts of throttle twists like the Duke 790 is. But the numbers don't lie, and they clearly tell a more glorious story of this 765. The traction control system, however, that's a little too intrusive in all the modes. And it reminds you that this vehicle was conceived for the funny Brit weather. Speaking of which, the rain mode mellows the throttle response as expected, while the sport mode makes a big difference to the way the power is delivered. If the memory of the Street Triple S serves me right, then the R definitely sounds a lot nicer too. whether you're ambling around the city or putting the 118 horses down on faster roads. Well, even at idling RPM, it has a nice throaty note to it, perfect for traffic lights or attracting the ire of stray dogs, whatever makes you happy. The powertrain also has a peculiar intake howl and people will notice you coming. It is the kind of sound that might make you forget how sharp a handler the 790 Duke is or was, and that could make your heart melt in favor of the Street Triple. The exhaust note is loud enough for me to not think about the Aero upgrade, though it promises marginal performance improvements that I don't really care about much. And that's because the Street Triple is pretty explosive out of the box, and its sharper handling characteristics compared to the S make it more than capable than I would ever push on the road. The twin spar chassis is suspended by 41mm upside down Showa separate function big piston forks, which are individually responsible for preload and damping. Of course, you can tune these forks to your liking, to your preference, but tuning them is going to require more tools than just a screwdriver, because reaching these adjusters with the handlebar in place is next to impossible. Unlike the separate function forks on the Kawasaki Versys 650 for example, which feature a pressure separation damper on one fork tube and a spring mechanism on the other, the SFF-BP has springs in both. Well, that jargon essentially translates to better adjustability, tighter body control, better weight distribution and a suppler ride comfort than Kawasaki's Adventure Tourer. Of course, typical to an Adventure Tourer, the Versys also has 40mm extra suspension travel. So compared to ADVs like that, you'll have to go even slower for potholes when you're on the Street Triple. In fact, you'll have to exercise the kind of caution that you would otherwise on a sports bike to protect those alloy wheels with their precious hand-painted pinstriping. These wheels are shod with the Pirelli Rosso 3 tires that are almost on par with the Rosso Corsa when it comes to road grip, but have a slightly longer life and better performance in the wet and even on concrete surfaces. The rear brakes come from the RS, while the M4.32 4-piston radial monoblock calipers up front are one of the best that Brembo offers for road use. In the equipment order, they sit below the likes of the Brembo M50s that you get on the RS or the new Brembo Stylemas that you get on a lot of new track-bred machines and even the Tiger 900 for that matter. Now these are at an advantage because they have a slightly softer and more progressive feel from the brake lever compared to the bitey M50s or the Stylemas, which honestly feel a little too sharp for road use. Compared to the Nissan brakes on the outgoing S, the R's brakes have lesser fade and are more confident for late or trail braking. In fact, save for the TFT and the track mode, all of the Street Triple R's equipment is only a shade lesser than the RS, and it not only shows in the test figures but also in how cracking its performance is out in the real world. But more importantly, the equipment choices that it makes the R as friendly to live with as you would expect from the Street Triple badge. And that makes it the perfect upgrade for anyone moving up from the quarter-litre class. At the same time, it is just as sprightly a street bike that is fit enough for the experienced rider to commute on. Furthermore, at the time of this test, the Street Triple R costs Rs 10.32 lakh on-road Mumbai, which is cheaper and more accessible than the S that it replaces. So while the price gap between this entry-spec Street Triple and the RS has widened for the better, the performance gap is a lot slimmer now, and that, I think, makes it all the street bike you might ever need.